We're going to start this course with what I believe to be the most important tip for how to structure your studies. This will be foundational. This philosophy that you're about to learn will vastly improve your approach to studying. It will make you more effective and more efficient, so you'll get more and better quality studying done in less time. Now, I know I said that I want you to take maybe around 5 ideas, 5 techniques from this course and apply them. But to be honest, my aim here is if you stopped the video, if you stopped the course after just this module, the very first one, we'd both be very happy because you'd have the most effective approach to your studies. You wouldn't need anything else. Everything else is a bonus. We're going to start with my favorite. Now, the thing is, most students are studying completely wrong. So when I was at university, there was tons of students who they would lock themselves in the library 8 to 10 hours. These were people who would deny themselves toilet breaks because they were cramming. They're traditional, what you'd expect a crammer to look like. No toilet breaks, they'd starve themselves, and you'd see these students like crying outside the library at midnight because they can't get enough information in their head. But the problem is, if you ask these students, like, oh, how long did you study today? They say, well, you know what, I studied 8 hours today. These students were not studying for 8 hours. Now, they were going on Facebook, they were scrolling through Instagram, they were talking to their friends, they were gazing out the window, and realistically, out of that huge block of time, that 8 hours, how much studying was actually done? I think when I look at these students, you've got about 20 minutes of studying in, which is a humongous waste of time. You've lost a whole day for 20 minutes, and realistically, you can, with this approach that I'm about to tell you, you can go to the library for 2 hours, and all those 2 hours will be golden, and then you can leave early and you can get on with your life, and you'll be way happier, way more effective than the student that's locked themselves in the library for about 10 hours and learned nothing. Now, when it comes to your studying, there is one adage to always keep in mind. Always remember this when you sit down to study and when you try to plan out your studies. Input is crap. Retention is king. It is not about how much you can stuff in your head, it's about how much you can keep and how much you can remember. So when it comes to your studying, we really want to emphasize reviewing, and we want to give ourselves more chances to review what we've already learned, to try and cement information that we've already gone over. There's no sense just like a streamliner just going with all the information, going through the book and trying to cram as much info in the head as possible. I'll give you a scenario. For example, just say you've got an upcoming trip to Tokyo and you want to learn some Japanese, so you look up one of those word frequency lists, like 1,000 most common Japanese words, that sort of thing. Whole books are written on this. But you can find this. Now imagine you go through and you try to cram all those words in your head and try and get them all in your head. Then you go to Tokyo and you can barely even remember how to say konnichiwa. However, a different approach, just say you scaled it way down and you chose a smaller list, 250 words, let's say, not 1,000. And your approach, instead of just shoving them all in your head, just say you study these for about 20 minutes. Then you go take a break, you go do something fun, you go for a run, talk to a friend or whatever. 5-10 minutes later, you come back, you spend another 20 minutes, and during that 20 minutes, you'll spend a portion going over what you've just looked at. Then maybe you learn a few more. Take another break, maybe you go eat something, you come back, and then you review what you learned in those 2 previous sessions, and then you learn a little bit more. Then you're done. You go about your life, you go do something else, read a book, go to the cinema, whatever. And then before bed, you spend, 10 minutes going over what you learned that day, and then you have a nice sleep. And in the morning, maybe first thing in the morning, maybe over a coffee, you spend another 5-10 minutes, again, looking at what you just learned without adding more information. Now, if you do that approach, unlike the person who tried to stuff 1,000 words in their head and then floundered when they got to Japan, you will be able to order drinks, you'll be able to greet people, you'll be able to introduce yourself, you might even be able to have very small, basic conversation. Your pronunciation is not going to be perfect, you might not fully understand the grammar, you definitely won't, it's a very hard language, but you will actually remember the phrases that you want to use on your trip. So which scenario is better? The second one obviously is way better. You spent less time studying and you were more effective and you were more likely to remember your studying. It's a better quality of studying. A lot of people will fool themselves and think that duration is equated with hard work. And a lot of people, think they've got to look busy and they've got to clock in a lot of time in order to be effective or to be seen to be studying. And really, the most effective students are the ones that look the laziest. I mean, we all remember that kid who got top marks in school but barely seemed to study. He probably looked quite arrogant and people didn't really like that kid because they just thought he was naturally gifted. Not really. I don't think that kid was naturally gifted. I'm talking because this was me. And that kid just had a better approach to studying where he would get better quality studying in less time. Less time is more effective. And the reason it's more effective is because we're working with how our brains actually work. We're not like computers. We can't just input loads and loads of data and expect to output it easily. We have to keep giving ourselves lots of touch points with information, lots of reviewing. To be honest, when you're learning a language, the most important thing is just to have a certain amount of dream sleep cycles to consolidate information. So it might take time to learn some information, but not like a big binge, like cramming session, not that sort of time. Just lots, little and often is key. This phenomenon actually has a name, and it's called the primacy and recency effect. And it basically states that we are more likely to remember things we see first and things we see last, and we usually forget the stuff in the middle. This holds true in all walks of life. If you think about movies, we're way more likely to remember the beginning and end of the movie, and a lot of stuff in the middle gets forgotten. So this is something filmmakers have to pay attention to, something they consider when filming their movie, writing the script and all that sort of thing. This holds true even in job interviews. It's unfair, but people who are hiring are more likely to remember the first candidate that walked through the door and the last candidate. And there'll be a lot of people in the middle that they just forget about. It's the primacy and recency effect. So what we want to do when we're studying is to give ourselves lots of primacy, lots of entry points and beginnings, and lots of recency, lots of endings. So lots of sessions we want to keep hitting those points because we're more likely to remember that. This means we need to break our studies up into manageable chunks that are structured in a very specific way. And we're going to look at a structure now. Now we're going to take an example of, just say you're studying for one subject for 6 hours a day. I'm not, necessarily saying that that's a good thing, that you don't have to study for 6 hours a day. Some days you might only have time to study an hour or 2 hours, 20 minutes, whatever. This is just an example, and you can adjust the times to whatever you have, but keep the philosophy the same. So let's have a look. So if you're studying 6 hours a day, just say you've got a nice Sunday, you've got a nice block of time where you can just be like, yo, I'm gonna bang out my studies. We're going to break your studies down into chunks. Just say you've got 6 hours, that's 6 study chunks. And the first study chunk is going to look like this. The first 5 minutes, you are going to review any material to do with this subject that you learned on a previous day or a previous study session. After that, the next 45 minutes are going to be learning new material. Then, 5 minutes following that, review everything you just learned in that session, okay? And then you have 5 minutes as a break. And what you're going to do on your break, I don't know, it's up to you. Go for a walk, maybe get a snack or a drink, talk to a friend very, very quickly, watch a little video. I think it's good to get some circulation and get some movement and stuff, get some water. Maybe you want to get another coffee or something, I don't know. Then you go into your next study chunk. And the opening 5 minutes of study chunk 2, you're going to be reviewing material from the first study chunk, what you just looked at. And then, next 45 minutes, that's when you learn new material. Then, 5 minutes, you're going to review the material in that study chunk. Then you have a 5 minute break again. Then comes study chunk 3, you have 5 minutes reviewing from the second study chunk, then 45 minutes looking at new material, and then 5 minutes reviewing that new material, then a 5 minute break. At this point, you want to have a bigger break, if possible. This might be 30 to 60 minutes, might be more, might be less, but it's a bigger break. It's good to be active during this. So if you hit the gym, that's a good thing. You might want to go for a quick run. You might want to stretch. Maybe you want to eat some food, read a book, watch some TV, whatever. This is a big break. Then after your big break, you'll have study chunk 4, where, as you guessed it, the opening 5 minutes, you're reviewing material from the third study chunk, the study chunk before the break. Then, the next 45 minutes, learning new material. 5 minutes reviewing, 5 minutes, another break. Then study chunk 5. You see where this is going. 5 minutes reviewing the material from the previous study chunk, 45 minutes learning the new material, 5 minute review of that chunk, and then another 5 minute break. Then study chunk 6, the last one. This is where you're not learning any new material whatsoever. You will spend 40 minutes and review everything from all of the study chunks you did that day. Now, obviously, you will adjust this. So, for example, just say your study chunks can only be 20 minutes a time. Then, you might spend 3 minutes reviewing. You might spend about 15, learning new stuff, and then another 3 or so going over that chunk. So you adjust, but keep the philosophy the same. Primacy and recency. Review, new material, review, break. Review, new material, review, break. Review, new material, review, break. This is how you study effectively. And this will, I used the example of 6 hours, but to be honest, you don't need to study 6 hours when this is your approach, because you'll be so damn effective. Make sure you have a lot of reviewing, okay? So with this approach, you want to be quite highly structured, okay? You want to, this is another mindset shift that will serve you well. Consider yourself as your own television broadcasting company. Now, if you turn on a channel, CNN, BBC, Cartoon Network, whatever, Sky, they have quite rigid schedules. So, 10 in the morning, news, 11, some boring documentary, 12:30, kids cartoon, 1 o'clock, drama. And then between these shows, they have ad breaks, don't they? Now, they don't have random ad breaks whenever they want. You're not just watching Tom and Jerry and then suddenly there's an ad for some cake and stuff like that. These are all structured. What you're going to be watching and the breaks are planned, pre-planned. And this is important. You need to do the same when it comes to your studies. You don't just wing it. So you don't just halfway through a study chunk decide that you need an ad break and you go on your phone and start going on Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that. You have these breaks planned in. So I can show you like a random day for me when I was studying in my 3rd year at Oxford. I was studying English, what my broadcasting schedule would have looked like. You can see here, for example, and this is a big day. Not every day looked like this, obviously. This would have been like a pre-planned study day. 9 a.m. I would have been looking at Chaucer, a work from him, and then 10 would have been looking at Gawain, and then 11 looking at a poem called Pearl, and then 12 there'd be a lunch break involving exercise. 1:30ish I'd be revising all the morning material. And remember, so when just look at the 10 a.m. I'm looking at a poem called Gawain and the Green Knight. The first 5 minutes of that, I am looking back at the Chaucer block, you know what I mean? And then I get the new material, I review that, and then I look back at what I did in that block. After lunch and after I've revised the morning material, around 2 I'd scheduled in some Donne, some of his poetry. Around 3, Alexander Pope. Around 4, dude called Earl of Rochester. Around 5, break for dinner or social stuff, and then 6:30 I'd be revising everything studied during that day. This was my broadcasting schedule. Now, how do you schedule this sort of thing? You want to get yourself a diary, and anything can work. You could use Google, one of the Google resources. You could use a calendar on there. You could use a Google Docs. You could use a scrap of paper. I like a physical diary that shows me the view of a day and all the time slots for a day, but in the context of an entire week. And I like a diary that can also show me my entire month at a quick glance. So if you look at this diary that I've got here, and links to every resource, material, and all that I mentioned in this course will be at benjaminmcavoy.com/study resources. So just go there whenever you see something mentioned, it will be there. Now you can see with this diary, you open it, and you've got the whole week in front of you, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, all the way through to Saturday. And what I love about this is you've got time slots from 5 all the way through to 10. So you can really become your own broadcasting company and say, right, from 9:30 to 10:30, I'm studying this. Keeping in mind that study technique, the primacy recency effect that we talked about. And not only that, but you can set goals for the day. So here I would put the main thing you're going to study, and you can break down your priorities, I just love this. If you can't get hold of this specific diary, you could just do something like this yourself quite easily. You can print off your own calendar, or you can just draw it yourself. I think it's very important. So what you do is you take a Sunday evening, maybe this takes an hour, who knows, maybe it takes 30 minutes. You're winding down from the week, maybe put some music on, being relaxed and enjoying the process. You plan out your whole week. Do you have to stick to it as the week goes on? No, because life happens and you can readjust. You just scribble out and readjust there. But you need to have a rough idea of what you want to get done for the week. So have a goal for the week. What do you want to study? What do you want to learn? Put some priorities here. And then what I love as well is if you flip through, you can see an entire month as well. And then you've got goals for the month, and action steps to take, so you can break it down. You might be like, oh, well, I need to study this, so but then break it down into these modules. So you'll know exactly what your month's going to look like as well. On top of that, you've got a little reflection period, and you can do this weekly or you can do this monthly, but basically it's important to celebrate what you did that month. You might put a few different achievements down. You might also try and come up with some mental blockers or distractions that got you and ways to overcome them. Maybe talk about how you treated yourself, rewarded yourself. We'll talk about that another time as well, because that's important. But basically, when you're studying, if you take just one thing away from this course, remember the primacy and recency effect. You want to maximize reviewing and treat yourself like a broadcasting company where you schedule your time ahead of time. I'll see you in the next module, where we'll talk about two of my other favourite psychological principles when it comes to studying. We're going to talk about how you can use loss aversion and social accountability in order to be way more effective and efficient with your studies.